she's there already from Kenya, the Presidential Advisor on Women's Rights in the Republic of Kenya, the Honorable Harriete Chiggai. And unfortunately, Professor Olive Shisana is not able to be with us this morning, but Honorable Harriete Chiggai and I will try and keep the IQ up in the room. Honorable Chiggai, thanks so much and welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we have this very important task of talking about whether the private sector leadership can actually advance gender equality. And I think it's a bit of a rhetorical question because the private sector has an obligation to actually make this happen. But let's just start off with your opening sentiments on this in terms of how businesses can actually do more in terms of advancing gender equality.
Be better than what they are, and how do we support them to ensure that they even make our businesses better? So issues of ensuring that the sexual harassment policies are in place and that they go beyond being on paper is very important. I will use Kenya as an example because it's closer home and to my heart. And globally, you've all seen the question of sexual harassment, especially in the tea sector, where T for sex has become almost like a daily slogan. So, and these are multinational, companies. So you can imagine if we have laws in place that are not being followed, we have institutional policies that are being breached. How then can we enhance this and ensure that we safeguard the spaces of women and at the same time we have high yield, high productivity margins? So working with the governments to ensure that their CSR and philanthropic investments speak matters GBV, because we have taken note that governments cannot do this alone. And that is where we need to plug in and work in hand with the private sector so that we can actualize this. We also need to think about calling out on inequalities through peer-to-peer mechanisms. I like the fact that you've organized this event because I can see all the big boys and big men, women in the room. And I would have really loved to even have this conversation further from here, because you realize that matters to do with peer-to-peer mechanization and mentorship within our workforces and how do we improve ourselves is very important, because peer-to-peer review is also something that is very, very, very good, because people then are open to speak, are open to put across their ideas, and they are open to actualize whatever it is that they want to put across. And then we create a good work environment for everybody. We also need to regulate sexist advertising that enhances stereotypes that subjugate women and girls. And at the same time, we have high yield, high productivity margins. So working with the governments to ensure that their CSR and philanthropic investments speak matters GPV, because we have taken note. I think we're having a technical hitch there. And that's where we need to plug in.
Indeed, we do. I think we will solve that.
Okay, sorry about that. The other thing that we need to think about is to regulate sexist advertisements that enhances stereotypes that subjugate women and girls. I think this is also very important. We also need to review the power plays in corporate sometimes corporate sometimes victimizes the victim in the name of protecting the good name of the said corporates. And then we have to have care work policies. And when I think about Kenya, I will talk about Kenya mostly because we have Safaricom. Safaricom was the first institution that put in the creche. And last week, during our Women in Construction forum, we have actually put in a policy that all government institutions and all new projects that are coming up in terms of offices must actually have a creche for the young mothers. So you see, these are issues to do with policy, but we actually need to actualize them. And from where I sit, with the support of the private sector, I think governments will go far in terms of delivery on matters policy, national policy, and the issue of gender will be well demystified, and it stops being public sector issue, but we now have to work hand in hand with the private sector to ensure that it's done.
And of course, there is no real impetus, one would say, at the moment, because if you think of what's happening in Europe, so you have the European Union Commission, and they've had a policy in place since 1957. And still today, in the most advanced countries in the world, you have a gender pay gap of 14%. And in South Africa, more like 20 to 35%. And the question is about implementation, because it's all good and well to craft these wonderful policies, but if you can't police them, if you can't implement them properly, what is the point? So what is government striving to do beyond crafting policy?
Exactly. When you look at the biggest challenges that are currently there, you realize that financing is a big problem. Financing for better responses and prevention in terms of structures. We also have issues of survivor-centered approaches that reduce re-victimization of survivors. Awareness creation of data on the cost of, GBV on the economy. We have issues to do with investment in M&E to monitor policy implementation. And then sustained voices to eliminate harmful practices where children and women are concerned. The biggest problem then is, in terms of us actualizing this, is coordination of all government agencies. And this, if it's well done, together with the private sector, will be able to go a whole long mile. Kenya has recently signed the letter of intent to accelerate matters women economic empowerment, which is also a women's rights issues with World Economic Forum. What that means then is, how do we leverage MSMEs, to be able to come up and leverage. And the issues, even when we discuss about all these issues, is purely coordination. How do we coordinate all sectors so that it's all hands on deck? Because if we work in silos, we'll not be able to achieve this within a very short time. So we've realized that we need all hands on deck. Everybody must come to the table. And I'm loving what the organizers of this event have done, because it's part of coordination in terms of how do we bring everybody on board so that we move together, so that the solutions we want to put in place is for everybody and everybody has a role to play. So coordination then becomes a big issue. And if we can all put our money, and our hands and efforts to ensure that there's proper coordination between the private and public sector, there's proper M&E, so that we can say, we've had these discussions for many years. We have given ourselves timelines and targets that for us to be able to actualize this, all these institutions must be able to give themselves timelines, and they must be able to map out and say, in the next 5 years, matters GBV, matters women, matters equality, we are now at 10%. In the next 5 years, we want to accelerate it and take it to 20%, 30, 40, or 50. Then we'll be able to measure ourselves and say, we've actually done something. But we have all these good discussions, the policies are in place. The issue is just purely coordination, because if we bring everybody on board, we'll be able to leverage and see these institutions, this is what they're doing, this is the plan. Government, this is what they're doing, this is the plan. So for us to mitigate all the issues that we are discussing now and reduce the time frame in terms of accelerating the solutions that we want to put in place, let us now have M&E. Let us monitor our work. Let us have coordination and engagements beyond our private institutions. And if we do that, I am sure we are actually going to go far in terms of bridging the gaps that are currently in place. Yeah.